Welcome students. I'm Dr. Sonu Shiva, Associate Professor, Department of English, Government Dungur College, Bikaner. This session is for ME Final Year English Literature, paper 8A, that is New Literatures in English. And I'll be talking about various themes in Metamorphosis. We know that the Metamorphosis deals with an absurd or wildly irrational event which in itself suggests that story operates in a random chaotic universe. Uh, Looking at the theme, the absurdity of life, it begins with an absurd event, that is Gregor waking up to discover he has turned into a giant insect. And since it's so far beyond the boundaries of a natural occurrence, it's physically impossible. Because it's just impossible thing that any human being converting into a giant insect, and it is beyond the boundaries of any natural happening. Gregor metamorphosis takes on a supernatural significance. We feel as if something supernatural has happened. A person has been converted into, has turned into an insect. Also notable is the fact that the story never explains Gregor's transformation. It never implies, for instance, that Gregor's change is the result of any particular cause, such as a punishment for some misbehavior. So that is the reason why he has been turned into a giant insect, that is not given, and there is no reason behind this turning up. The responses of the various characters add to the sense of absurdity. The characters are usually calm and unquestioning, and most don't act particularly surprised by the event. There is no indication that Gregor deserves this fate. Rather, in the story, we see that all the members of Samsa family treat this event as a random occurrence, like catching any other illness. All these elements together give the story this distant overtone of absurdity and suggest that this universe, it functions without any governing system of order or justice. You also see in this story a disconnection between mind and body. Gregor's transformation completely alters his outward appearance, but it leaves his mind unchanged. So there's a disconnect between his mind and his body. He's completely changed from outside, but his mind remains unchanged, creating a discord or lack of harmony between his mind and body. Gregor gradually behaves more and more like an insect, not only craving different foods that he did when he was human, but also beginning to prefer tight, dark spaces like the area under his sofa and enjoying crawling on the walls and ceiling. So these are the traits that you can see of an insect in him. But Gregor's humanity never disappears entirely. He feels conflicted as a result. This conflict reaches its climax when Great and his mother move furniture out of Gregor's room. Gregor initially approves of the idea because that will give him more space and it's going to make him comfortable. Because without furniture, he'll be able to crawl anywhere, wherever he pleases. Suddenly, he realized that his possessions, which represent to him as his former life as a human, provide him emotional comfort. He suddenly faces a choice. So, on one hand, he prefers that the furniture should be moved, which is going to give him more space. But then he was emotionally attached to some possessions as a human being. So suddenly he feels that he has a choice. He can be physically comfortable or emotionally comfortable, but not both. So in other words, his mind and body remained opposed to one another. Gregor is unable to relinquish his humanity. He chooses emotional comfort, leading him desperately cling to the picture of a woman in furs. So there's a reference to a picture of a woman in furs, to which Gregor clings to, and he tries to emotionally choose comfort in his room. You also see in this story the limits of sympathy. After Gregor's metamorphosis, his family members struggle with the feeling of both sympathy and revulsion towards him. Uh, this both opposite or contradictory feelings can be seen. Greta and his mother in particular feel a great deal of sympathy for Gregor after his change, apparently because they suspect some aspect of humanity still remains in his appearance, uh, because his presence is never forgotten in the house. Eventually, the stresses caused by Gregor's presence wear them out, causing the family members to feel constantly uncomfortable and leading them to speak to each other, mostly in whispers. So, in the beginning, he has a sympathy because they think that maybe there is some element of humanity left in him, and but slowly they get tired of it, and then they start speaking to each other in whispers. The fact that Gregor cannot communicate his thoughts and feelings to them leaves them without any connection to his human side. And then there is a gap of communication that comes where you see that Gregor is not able to speak out his feelings and thoughts. And consequently, they come to see him more and more as of an actual insect. So, all these factors they combine steadily and it works against their sympathy, and their sympathy has a limit, and family reaches a point where Gregor's presence is too much to bear. Grete also shows uh, most sympathy towards this Gregor, but slowly she also decides that they must get rid of him. So the sympathy comes to a limit. You also see the economic effects on human relationships in the story. Gregor is enslaved by his family because he is the one who makes money, because he was the only earning member. Then, with the possible exception of his sister, the family seems to treat him not as a member but as a source of income. When Gregor is no longer able to work because he is converted into an insect after his metamorphosis, he is treated with revulsion and neglected because he is no longer an economic person who provides money to the family. Once the family begins working, they also find difficulty communicating with each other and eating dinner in silence and fighting among themselves. So there's a lot of effect on human relationship whenever money is involved. The exhaustion of dehumanizing jobs and the recognition that people are only valuable so long they earn salary keeps anyone who works isolated from others and unable to establish human relations with them. So there's a point that anyone who is earning for the family is important, and Gregor, who is not able to earn for the family anymore, he is neglected, and the human relationships is cut with him. There's an element of family duty that is involved because Gregor was also working for his family. You see here that Gregor hates his job, but he follows the call of duty to his family and goes far beyond simple duty. The family, on the other hand, takes care of Gregor not because of their care towards him, but we see that they are taking care of Gregor only so far as the duty seems to necessary. He is kept locked in the room and brought food. In the end, his room is barely clean, and his sister no longer takes care about him and what food she brings him. Her actions are routine, and she only wants to do enough that she can claim that she has fulfilled her duty. So, when she decides that she has already done enough and her duty has been fulfilled, she feels that they should get rid of him. So, there is a lot of family duty instead of any family care that is involved in this story. There's an element of alienation in the story. Gregor is alienated from his job, his humanity, his family, and even his body. As we see from the fact that he barely notices his transformation, in fact, even his consideration for his family seems to be something alien to him, as he barely notices it when he loses this consideration at the end. So you feel that slowly Gregor gets alienated from everything, whether it's his job or his humanity because he's turned into an insect, his family, and even his body and his ties with the family also start breaking, and he loses the connection with the family also. After his metamorphosis, Gregor feels completely alienated from his room and environment. So, metamorphosis is a powerful indictment of the alienation brought on by modern social order. Somewhere it indicates that in the modern society, how any human being gets alienated slowly without even realizing it. The story Metamorphosis is also about freedom and escapism. Gregor is trapped in his job by his duty to his family, but he dreams of a day when he can finally pay off the debts and quit his job. So there is a feel that he wants to be free of his job and be free for his own self. His need for freedom from the restrictive demands of the work is expressed in Metamorphosis, by means of which he escapes. And he does get to escape his job, but on the cost of what? That he is converted into a, he gets transformed into a giant insect. This escape, however, fails to bring Gregor freedom, for he is now imprisoned by the family in his room. So, from one imprisonment, he moves to another imprisonment. Thus, when Gregor works, he's enslaved by his job, and when he doesn't work, he's enslaved by the family. So, there is no way of balancing out freedom or duty in the story, and in the end, one is always a slave. So, there's a modern social touch in this story, that in the end, one is always a slave to either one thing or the another, and the only means to escape this being a slave, being enslaved, is death. There is uh, guilt that is expressed in this um story. Guilt stems out from family duty. When Gregor is not able to um, work for his family, he has that feeling of guilt in him, and this is guilt is the most powerful emotion in Gregor. When he's transformed into an insect, Gregor is made unable to work by circumstances beyond his control. Despite the fact that his metamorphosis is not his fault, however, he is racked by guilt every time that family mentions money, or that he thinks about the pain that he has inadvertently inflicted on them by losing the ability to support them. So, whenever there's a mention of a money by the family, he's always uh, full of guilt because he is not able to support his family. Guilt, it turns out, is deadly. And this guilt turns out deadly as Gregor realizes at the end that his life is the only thing keeping family from a better life. He thinks that it is his life because he's living, his family's and his family has to support him. That's why his family is not able to live a better life, all because of him. He dies for them just as he lives for them out of guilt. And we find that in the end, Gregor dies. Just as he lived for them, he dies for them because of his guilt. So, here somewhere that Kafka seems to suggest that life sometimes confers on human being an absurd destiny, and he is powerless to escape. He makes the point with a fantasy about a man who wakes up one morning with the body of gigantic bug, and women in modern society, men and women do wake up without knowing the purpose of life and without any sense of control over the course of life. And the same way, Gregor also loses control over his life, and slowly his life turns meaningless and he dies out of guilt. Thanks for this session.